Last episode, I went through the founding documents of 3 professions that lost their apprenticeship and built one on purpose. Every one of them moved only after the failure produced a body count or a scandal. So this episode measures hours, before anybody has to count bodies. The claim is that the entry rung has collapsed, that the collapse survives the obvious objections, and that the people who measured it still refuse to say what caused it. All 3 are load-bearing. A series that has spent 4 episodes asking for evidence does not stop asking when the evidence flatters it. The best measurement anybody has is a payroll record. Eric Brynjolfsson, Bharat Chandar and Chen at Stanford have been reading ADP payroll data covering millions of American workers through June 2026. Payroll is not a survey of how managers feel, it is what got paid. The first of their 6 facts cuts against the panic. There is no widespread displacement. Employment across the sample grew about 6% from late 2022, and in the most exposed occupations it still grew about 4%. They went looking for economy-wide job losses and did not find them. I want that on the record before I show you the part that is. Now split the same workforce by age and by how exposed the occupation is. Employment of 22 to 25-year-olds in the 2 most exposed groups fell about 11% between November 2022 and June 2026. The same age group in the 3 least exposed groups grew about 10%. That is 21 percentage points, or 19% below where the young would be had they kept pace. Run it for everybody older and there is no comparable gap. Workers aged 35 to 49 in those same exposed occupations grew about 10%, straight through the years the youngest were falling. Exposed work did not shrink. The entrance to it did. Here is the detail that nearly hides all of it. Total employment for 22 to 25-year-olds is close to flat, a fall of 1.9%. The 2 most exposed groups were about 57% of that age band, so their 11% decline took roughly 6 points off the whole, and growth elsewhere put most of it back. The authors add that the reallocation does not fully offset it. The aggregate looks calm because young people are still being employed. They are being employed somewhere else. 2 features of the shape matter. It runs through hiring rather than separations, and the evidence for that is good. Separation rates fell for everybody, and among the young they fell at least as much in the most exposed occupations as in the least, the opposite of what displacement would produce. Nobody was replaced. The doors stopped opening. And the adjustment shows up in employment rather than pay, with a caveat I have not aired before. The pay they can see is base salary. Bonuses, commissions and equity are invisible to them, and those are largest in exactly the occupations being measured. Not wages means not base wages, and no more. The gap is widening, which is their 3rd fact. At the July 2025 data vintage the shortfall was 15%. At June 2026 it is 19%. They draw our own occupation as a case study, so I took the numbers off the figure. For software developers, the 22 to 25 line sits about a 5th below where it stood in November 2022. The 41 to 49 line sits about a 5th above. Same occupation, same firms, same 4 years. I took both off their chart, because the paper prints no number, so hold them as a shape. Now the objections. The first is that late 2022 is when cheap money ended and the industry began unwinding pandemic hiring. Perhaps this is a correction wearing an AI costume. They test it, and interest rate exposure turns out to be negatively correlated with AI exposure. Construction is rate sensitive, knowledge work is not. Controlling for it moves their estimate by a single thousandth in one sample, and by 19 thousandths in the other. Excluding computer occupations barely moves it either, which also disposes of the software tax argument. But their own footnote says that measure was built from pre-pandemic monetary policy shocks and loads most heavily on goods sector channels, so it may capture the later rises on exposed knowledge work imperfectly. The rebuttal is strong, it is not airtight, and they are the ones who say so. The second objection bites, and it gets full weight. Control for how educated an occupation is, and the estimated decline roughly halves. In their second sample it falls by about 2/3 and stops being significant. They do not bury that. They say the 2 estimates bracket a range, and which end you believe depends on what education is measuring. If it mostly stands for exposure to the written down knowledge AI is good at, the larger estimate is the one to prefer. If it stands for a separate shock to educated workers, schooling damaged in the pandemic, say, the smaller one is. That fork is unresolved, though the authors do say worsening education cannot fully explain their results. Anybody quoting the headline without it is selling you something. Third, some of this predates ChatGPT. Exposed occupations boomed during the pandemic and fell back after. About 13 points of the fall unwind that boom, and about 17 carry the gap below where it sat before. A pure reversion should have stopped at the old baseline, which it reached in late 2022, and instead it ran on for more than 3 years, through a stretch of falling interest rates. Their own limit, it argues for structural explanations over cyclical ones, and their named candidates are AI, pandemic schooling, and remote work. Fourth, this is one payroll provider. In the American Community Survey, the same gap is too small to distinguish from zero. Split by sector, though, and the two agree closely in professional, information and financial services, where our occupation lives. Their verdict, the size looks specific to this payroll sample, the direction is what generalizes. The monthly survey cannot settle it. One footnote says it holds between 23 and 48 young software developers a month. That is the payroll, and 3 other instruments point the same way. Ours first, on the 15th of August, 2026, the job boards of Anthropic, OpenAI and xAI carried 1,412 open postings, and postings are not people. Engineering posts inviting new graduates or early career applicants numbered 3. Of the software engineering roles stating a minimum, 63 of 71 wanted for years or more. Second, Signal Fire, reading profiles rather than payroll, puts new graduate and entry-level hiring down about 65% across the 12 companies it calls the tech majors against 2019. Third, the Bureau of Labor Statistics projects computer programmers to fall 6% by 2034 while software developers grow 16%. The junior-shaped occupation is the one shrinking. So the team looked at itself, and this part is our own worked example, not anybody's data. Since the start of 2023, and before the one that brought the new hire in, they opened 5 engineering requisitions. Every one was senior. Not one was junior. When the manager went back through them, there was no meeting, no policy, no memo. Each was written by somebody under pressure who needed the thing shipped, and each time the honest answer to what do we need was somebody who already knows. 5 times. That is the local mechanism under the national number, and it is why nobody can point at whoever closed the door. Nobody closed it. It closed one requisition at a time. So, the self-check, and it is still a watch this. I am calling it the confound drill. Make the case against this episode, out loud, to another person. Argue that this is the end of cheap money and nothing else. Argue that it is remote work. Argue that it is schooling damaged in the pandemic, arriving on time. If you cannot make those arguments, you do not own the claim, you are only repeating it. The artifact is the dossier card, claims on one side, confounds on the other. You will know it worked when somebody on your team states the strongest objection before you can. That is the rupture, measured. Next episode, the doors are closing, and the people have started walking away from them too.